And well, thank you for inviting me to speak this morning. I suspect that some of you listening today are already members of the Devon and Exeter Institution. And if you're not already a member, then well, I hope this morning you might be inspired to join us. But I thought I would begin just with a very brief introduction. So for those of you who have not discovered us yet, the Devon and Exeter Institution is a membership library. It's also an independent library, a historic library, and an educational charity. Some people join us to use the library for research, and I'll be talking about our research collection and our research service. Other people join the library to read the newspapers and magazines and to meet with friends. So the institutions actually means different things to different people. You can find us at number 7 Cathedral Close, right in the heart of the city. We are the building with the sundial. That's how I often remember it. People sometimes describe us as a bit of a TARDIS. So from the front door here, you would never think that inside are 2 huge galleried Georgian libraries. You can see the 2 libraries in this view, which was taken from the cathedral opposite, the cathedral roof. So the outer library, I don't know if you can see my cursor, is here, and then the inner library behind. And then right at the back is the remains of a Tudor dwelling on the site, which was previously the residence of the librarian, sadly before my time, otherwise I would be living there myself now. But like the other dwellings in that row, number 7 originated as a medieval clergy house, possibly dating back to as early as the 13th century. And then from the late 16th century, it was leased to various non-clerics, and eventually it was leased to the Courtenay family of Powden Castle as their townhouse for whenever they were in Exeter on business. And the Courtenay coat of arms can still be seen in our refreshment room, which is called the Courtenay Room. Just a little bit of a tour of the inside of the building. So from the first floor reading room, we offer the best view in town, straight across the green to the cathedral. And this room is actually available to hire for meetings and away days. Should you ever require a room for such events in the city centre, do get in touch. And actually room hire comes with the option of a library tour. So we're a Georgian library in its original setting. This is a slice right down through the 2 libraries, and each room has a magnificent cupola and a gallery running around the edge. And if you would like to visit and have a look round, then we do offer free drop-in public tours on Wednesday afternoons, actually, throughout the year. So do have a look at our website. You actually don't need to book, although at the moment, obviously, we are a little bit careful of numbers because of the current COVID restrictions, although that's all due to change, isn't it? But the institution was founded in 1813. It's not the first proprietary library in Devon. I think Tavistock's was a few years earlier in 1799. Although I don't think they got their premises until early 1820s. The Plymouth Proprietary Library also is a bit earlier. It dates from 1810. But actually, sadly, the original building was bombed during the Second World War, I think. So the Devon and Exeter Institution, or actually the DEI, is the earliest surviving proprietary library building in Devon. And actually, from the outset, it was to be Exeter's first museum, as well as a library, and it hosted events, including scientific demonstrations. It was even hired out to musical societies who used it to practice for concerts. So it was a library and a museum and a music hall and a lecture theatre and a science laboratory and a debating chamber. It was a sort of real Enlightenment institution. And its founding purpose reflected the ideals of the Enlightenment. So it was for the general diffusion of science, literature and art, and for illustrating the natural and civil history of the county of Devon and the city of Exeter. And the heart of the institution is the library, and the foundation collection, or what we call the foundation collection, the earliest books collected, reveals the sort of intellectual and cultural and artistic and political interests of our region from the beginning of the 19th century. And it includes books, obviously, the earliest dating from the late 15th century, bound local newspapers, which were collected from the outset. So we have a really strong collection of early broadsides, also periodicals, various pamphlets and tracts, and many of which are very rare. And our earliest members had wide-ranging interests in all sorts of subjects that you can see here: science and mathematics and engineering and natural history and voyages and travel, art and architecture, philosophy, music, history, religion. And I suppose the important thing to say about the institution is that it was a working library. So the members didn't collect fine bindings or private press books. This was a modern reference library to disseminate knowledge in the popular subjects of the day. And you can tell this simply by looking at our shelves. Almost every other book is held together with conservation tape now. And the reason for this is that these books were borrowed and taken home. I mean, they were bundled up and delivered to members' homes by horse and cart. So, you know, they've had 200 years of pretty constant handling. And the library also developed a very strong identity as a repository for material on the West Country, which we loosely define as Devon and Cornwall, with the sort of borders of Dorset and Somerset. All of our books are searchable online, either on the University of Exeter's library management system or on JISC Library Hub Discover, which was formerly known as COPAC. The researchers among you will be very familiar with using Library Hub Discover, I'm sure. I mean, essentially, it just means that our collections can be searched online directly by anyone in the world. If you want to search our book collections, you can do so very easily from a link on our website. You can see the various menu options. If you choose the library, you come up with this screen, and you can see there's the option there to search our books and manuscripts, and that will take you straight to the catalogue. You can also see next to that, search our prints and drawings. And this is really what I want to talk to you about in more detail today, because the institution's members over the years also collected prints and drawings. We estimate around 9,000, but we can't be sure, for the simple reason that they're not really fully listed and numbered or catalogued yet. So just over 2 years ago now, we planned an ambitious project to sort and inventory and digitise our prints and drawings collection. And I joined the team at the DEI about 20 months ago, just after the project was underway. And projects, they usually address challenges or opportunities. I mean, in our case, the challenge that we needed our project to address was really threefold. The collection of prints and drawings was largely unsung. I think previous librarians and members, you know, would have known about the collection, of course, and used it from time to time. And even now, people get to know about our prints and drawings collection through word of mouth, which is great. But it's not really how libraries are supposed to function, and widening access to collections is fundamental, especially when you have the sort of collection that we have at the DEI, which I will tell you a little bit more about later on. But for a long time, our prints and drawings weren't really being exploited and widely engaged with. The second problem is it's actually hard to exploit your collection when you don't really know what you have. And for years and years, the artworks weren't properly numbered or inventoried. And it's through the process of creating inventory records and then catalogue records that you discover what you have. And then when you know what you have, you can begin to plan how you're going to use it. And I suppose the third problem we have is that the collection wasn't appropriately stored, and the poor storage conditions were actually contributing to long-term damage of the artworks. So it's better now than it was, but it's not there yet. We need more robust permanent storage. So these three problems or challenges formed the basis for our project, which is called Our Region Revealed. And our main objective throughout all of it is to widen access to our collections, not just to serious researchers, but to everybody. And it's really a 5-year plus project that we've undertaken in 2 stages. We've just completed phase 1, and we're now planning for phase 2. I think almost immediately the Devon Heritage Centre was involved, and we had volunteers from the DEI who worked in the conservation studio at Soughton, cleaning the artworks and putting them into Melanex. And all of this work was under the sort of expert supervision of the staff there, Deborah Phillips and her team. And this is one of our volunteers, Jeff, who worked with us on the project for a couple of years, cleaning artworks, and who we're really hoping will come back and work with us on the second phase of our project. We also had a volunteer, Pete Waite, who I'm sure many of you know. He was largely responsible for listing the artworks on an Access database for us and creating basic inventory records for them. So these are things essentially including a unique number, a title, the name of the artist or engraver if it's known, the date or at least a probable date if the artwork is undated, and most importantly, the subject depicted in the artwork. And we've been really fortunate to have Pete on board. He worked for a long time at the local studies library in Exeter, and he has a really impressive knowledge of Devon, which is something that I don't have because I've spent the last 25 years in London. But Pete has been able to identify places and buildings in the artworks. So having volunteers with local knowledge who can identify the subjects within the artworks has been so important. Not least, actually, because they can draw connections between our collections at the DEI and those that are held at other local repositories. And this is just one example. It's a watercolour of St George's Church by George Townsend in the DEI's collections. And then next to it, Townsend's line drawing of the same church, which I believe is in the Devon Heritage Centre. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the process of cataloguing has given us far more of an idea about how our collections complement and juxtapose other local collections. So it means that local collections are not silos of information, but that they can sort of speak to each other. We've got a very small staff team at the DEI. We run the institution really with about, on an ongoing sort of day to day, with around 2.8 members of staff. So much of our work is facilitated and supported by volunteers, a volunteer team, which includes all ages. So we have students who are seeking perhaps to progress to graduate jobs in the sector, in the heritage sector, and they come and do some training and work experience at the institution. And we also have retirees who want to belong to and participate in the community of the institution. So the project has brought together people of all ages and stages, which is a really lovely balance to have at the institution. And I would say at this point that if you are looking to volunteer somewhere really friendly, in an absolutely stunning location, then do think about joining us, because we have lots of different ways for volunteers to get involved. We're always delighted to welcome more. We're a very friendly bunch of people. If you're a book and art enthusiast, then do consider joining us. But to undertake a project of this scale from scratch, we needed funding. We put together bids for funding and we were successful. The Pilgrim Trust awarded our project £20,000 in May 2019, and that enabled us to employ a part-time digitisation project coordinator to put in place essentially the digital infrastructure for the project, to digitise the collection and to run a pilot to assess what was going to be feasible in the next stage of the project. Some of you I know will have met Carol Anderson, who was our digitisation project coordinator. She was employed on the first phase of the project, which has just come to an end, and sadly she left us last month. And actually, had this talk been scheduled earlier in the year, then it would be Carol who would probably be talking to you as well as me today. But we ran our project in phase 1 with Towns Web Archiving, who are digitisation specialists. They're based in Kettering. And for the pilot, we made an initial selection of 274 loose artworks and 7 sketchbooks. And the sketchbooks were sent off first, and then the loose artworks were boxed up, collected by Towns Web in September 2019. I think we had the whole lot digitised and returned by very early 2020. So actually not long before the whole country went into lockdown. We were really lucky to get the artworks returned before all transport across the country came to a complete halt. And so then we had our first batch of images of our artworks. And the timing actually was extraordinary, because in March 2020, just as we were forced to close our doors and begin that first national lockdown, we were able to begin to develop online access to our collections and to begin to think creatively about how we could engage our members and volunteers who were now isolating at home, and some for long periods of time. So our project sort of pivoted a bit at this point. I mean, COVID-19 has been the most extraordinary challenge, and it's ongoing, isn't it? We're definitely not out of the woods yet, but challenges like that also come with opportunities. And part of the DEI's pandemic response has been to reach out to our membership and the wider public through digital media, and to consider ways to keep in touch with people who are housebound, and to create ways to continue to involve everybody in the work of the institution. So that was a positive, really, that came out of an awful situation. And if you follow us on social media, then you will know some of our initiatives that we used really to divert people who were isolating at home, all of which would not have been possible without our digitisation project. I'll mention just a few fun ones. We had online jigsaw puzzles, which have been really popular. We keep adding more. Each one is a drawing or an engraving from our collections. So if you like jigsaw puzzles, then do have a look at our website. They're really addictive, I have to warn you. This is the finished version of that previous puzzle. I just have to tell you that they're not all sort of 8 huge pieces like this one, but in order to actually do the jigsaw puzzle for the PowerPoint, I just picked the easiest one. But you can actually have a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle if you really want a challenge. We also created some online research call-outs on our website that invited anyone anywhere really to volunteer and help us identify subjects or details in our collections. So this was the first research call out very early on in lockdown, which invited people to offer information on our trade card collection, on the businesses within the trade card collection. And then we also had another research call out more recently, asking people to help us identify places or buildings depicted in our prints and drawings. And in phase 2 of the project, we will have more online research call outs. So if you have a good local knowledge and would like to get involved in our project, then do consider participating in our online research opportunities. We'll be advertising a few more in due course. So generally, you know, we've been able to disseminate our images far and wide, really. We have a really active social media presence, and I realise that not everybody is on social media, but actually it's a good way of linking to all sorts of other organisations in Exeter and further afield, and you know, including Exeter Culture and Exeter Heritage Alliance, UNESCO City of Literature initiatives. So if nothing else, the COVID crisis has demonstrated actually the importance of digitising collections and providing access to them online. And you know, we have all been stuck at home at some point over the last 18 months, and we've also began putting our book collections online through online displays and blogs. We've filmed lectures, and you know, here we are still online today, so I imagine it will continue for a while yet. We had an inkling quite early on, actually, that COVID was going to be around for quite some time. So we also decided to use lockdown to expedite the purchase of our online collections explorer, so that all of you at home can search our prints and drawings collections online. So we were fortunate to receive development funding from the National Lottery in March 2020 for a major new project, and a little bit of those funds enabled us to purchase our online public access interface for our collections database. So when you click on that link to search our prints and drawings on our website that I pointed out earlier, you then arrive here, which is our online collections explorer. It's hosted by Towns Web Archiving, and we use PastView. It's a software package. If you haven't had a play on this, then do take a look around. You can do, I don't know whether you can see it at the top of the screen, but you can do a very simple keyword search, or you can browse by collection. And we have a few items already available relating to Crediton. I should do a quiz really, but I think it will be a bit too easy for you. This is Showbrook Park. It's a pencil and watercolour sketch by Edward Ashworth, and plans of the Church of the Holy Cross in Crediton. Most of the church plans that we hold were produced by the Exeter Diocesan Architectural Society. And just to go to this screen, we also have a facility on PastView to purchase high-res images. So if you like what you see, you can download images, and all the funds go towards our Library Conservation Fund. One of the things that we had to do from scratch was decide what detail to include in our records. Now, most records you see on our online collections explorer are like this one. They are inventory records, not catalogue records. Inventory records are really the bare minimum required by the Spectrum Museum's Collections Management Standard, which was developed by the Collections Trust, and which we use as the basis for our cataloguing. And you can see here a basic inventory record for an elevation of the east window in the Church of Holy Cross, And this is really, it's sufficient to search and locate artworks. And in the first phase of our project, our objective is to increase online access, to get the artwork scanned and searchable via these inventory records. And the next stage is cataloguing, and that means adding more detail. Sometimes, for example, an inventory record will give only the name of one maker, but artworks might have more than one. They might have an artist, an engraver, and sometimes even a publisher. So cataloguing will provide more information, but it does take time to do it well. It requires quite a bit of research in order to, I suppose, communicate the significance of an artwork, not just who made it and when. And of course, you would want to, I mean, here it says David McIntosh. Here you would want to actually put dates to the artists and engravers that you identify. Eventually, we are hoping all our records will look like this. I'm sorry, I've got my Zoom little screen right in front of the inventory record, but essentially this is a pencil and wash drawing of the church in Salcombe Regis. And so the difference that you see here is that there's a little bit of research attached to the record that tells you more about the drawing. The artist, if the artist is known, and the subject depicted. So it's rather like adding an exhibition label or panel to an artwork. And as you know, as you've heard, I worked for 20 years as a curator at the V&A, and one aspect of my job was cataloguing archives and rare books and prints and drawings. And the V&A's catalogue records include what we used to call a public access description. So essentially, I've sort of borrowed that to use on the DEI's records. And it means when you click on a record, you get more information. So there are levels of data. You still get your top level inventory record on the right here, but then you can drill down into the detail of the artwork so that the record, I suppose, meets the needs of different users. So it's useful for serious researchers, but also it meets the needs of people who just want to find pictures about Salcombe Regis. And as we move to the next phase of the project, we will have a team of volunteers who will have local knowledge and are researchers and writers who will help us create these public access descriptions. So it's a great opportunity again for people who love to do really thorough research to get involved in the collections and take part in sort of collaborative creation of metadata on the collections. I would say that for anyone looking to plan a similar project, there's no right or wrong way of cataloguing. You might choose to create your inventory and your catalogue record at the same time and only upload records when they are fully researched and catalogued. And I have catalogue collections in the past which were already very well known, and they were printed catalogues, and I had a sort of decade of expertise and knowledge in my head, so I didn't have to spend a lot of time researching artworks to create catalogue records. It really depends on resources, but you know, both in terms of staff and time. And if you have limited funding and staff on fixed term contracts, then you want to get the most out of the time and the resources that you have. And for us at the DEI, that meant really getting as many artworks scanned and inventoried and online as quickly as possible, because there's always time to go back and add to catalogue records later. And the good thing is that once your artworks are visible online, you get all sorts of people emailing you saying, oh, I know who that artist is, or I recognise that farm, it's somewhere in Cadbury, or whatever. So just actually going back to the previous one, another good thing about online cataloguing is that you can make connections between artworks within your own collection. So, for example, you could click on the little related collections link there and view all the architectural plans in the DEI on one screen, or you could view all the watercolours of Topsham on one screen. So access to collections is actually really dynamic when the collections are catalogued online. Of course, like, you can still come and see the original artworks. I should probably say that. And I would always encourage you to do that, because there's no substitute for seeing the original artworks, no matter how good the digitized image is. I think this is the museum curator in me talking, but you know, yes, you might have to have a bit of fuss. You might have to wash your hands, and you might have to make sure you're handling the artworks correctly, and someone will probably instruct you on how to turn the pages. But actually, to hold one of Edward Ashworth's sketchbooks and look really closely at his pencil lines and his brushwork, I mean, that sketchbook is a tangible link to the past. You know, it's a museum object, and 150 years ago, you know, Edward Ashworth held that same sketchbook and made those marks in it. So, you know, these are not just sources of information on our county, they are museum objects that communicate, I think, I mean, for me, so much more than documentary information within. And the same, I would say, is the same with our book collection, that these books are museum objects. They were owned by particular people. They communicate so much more than what's just within them. Moving on with the project. So we decided towards the end of last year to consider the possibility of scanning artworks in-house for two reasons. It actually reduces the risks of sending your artworks halfway across the country. And it also reduces the not insignificant costs involved in professional digitization. I think it would have been extremely expensive to get all 9,000 artworks digitized professionally. It's also much quicker to do it in-house. So we were fortunate once again to receive funding, and this time from FODA, Friends of Devon's Archives. And with their help, we were able to purchase an A3 graphic arts scanner. We did a lot of research on scanners. So if anyone is in the process of cataloguing or thinking about buying a scanner for similar purposes, then I would be more than happy to talk you through options. We ended up with a really great scanner, and it's meant that we've been able to continue to add artworks to our Collections Explorer. So where we are at the moment, we've finished phase 1 of the project. We've completed our pilot with Townsweb. We're in the process of applying for funding for phase 2 of the project, and we are hoping that we can begin again either later this year or at the beginning of next year. And in that second phase, we really want to complete the digitization of the collection. So we reckon we have about another 7,700 artworks to go. So we are definitely in this for the long haul. We are also aiming to, I mean, not just have fantastic access online, but also to embed the collection within our learning and engagement programme. And so that means school groups and lifelong learning workshops and public lectures to really engage people with the collections. I mean, I suppose the DEI has two threads, if you like. There are the collections and the programme, and those two areas work in unison. You know, there's really no point in having collections if no one is enjoying them. And I suppose we'd like also to use the collections to inform a research strategy so that we can commission research into our collections. So that's what we will be aiming for in the next part of the project. I thought I would just give you some idea quickly of what we have in the collection before I finish. My favourite part of the collection is Edward Ashworth's sketchbooks. We have 7. They are all absolutely stunning. He was a church architect from the mid-19th century. He died right at the end of the century, 1896. But he was elected a member of the Exeter Diocesan Architectural Society. And we were given the sketchbooks by his son, Clark Ashworth. Edward Ashworth was originally from Tumley. He trained in London with Charles Fowler, who designed Covent Garden Market, but who was also a Devon lad. He was from Clumpton. And Ashworth returned to Devon, set up his practice in Exeter, and restored or rebuilt many churches in Devon. And actually, I live in Topton, which has one of the churches that he rebuilt. And his sketchbooks are full of wonderful architectural details, impetuously scribbled and annotated, really as a sort of aid memoir, drawn almost certainly on sight and not from memory. These are a wonderful record, I suppose, of the sorts of architectural features that were considered important and interesting to record at the time. Ashworth was also a great artist. So he was a watercolorist, and his sketches of Devon are truly wonderful. Just sit back and enjoy these for a moment. This is his view of Exmouth, looking across to Dawlish Warren, and a similar view taken right down the far end of Exmouth where the marina is, again looking across to Dawlish. A farm in Newton St Sires. I love that sort of earthy red colour, that sort of West Country earthiness. The church and Main Street in Wimpole, and of course Topsham, with the Bridge Inn on the right, and then the house on the other side of the bridge, which is still there, and Stoke Cannon. And then lastly, there's a lovely view of Beer Farm in Rowe. And notice what I really love about these drawings is that Ashworth sort of populates his drawings with local people going about their business. So you get a flavour of what life was like in mid-19th century Victorian Devon. You know, these are not just records of landscapes and buildings, they are pictures of rural life. And if you like Edward Ashworth's sketches and drawings, then you will want to purchase our note cards of Devon watercolours, all taken from Edward Ashworth's sketchbooks. These are available to order from our website. We also have a set of postcards of our local trade cards. And if you like the drawings of the Exeter Diocesan Architectural Society, then we also have a pack of note cards for you. We thought they sort of doubled up as Christmas cards because we thought they looked quite Christmassy, but they are actually blank, so suitable for all year round. We have an extensive archive of the Exeter Diocesan Architectural Society, which was founded to sort of report on Devon's churches, and the scrapbooks that we have contain these records, and they're so beautifully presented and put together. On the left is Broadcliff Church, and there's a lovely romantic sort of sepia watercolour wash drawing by Edward Ashworth at the top, which is sort of juxtaposed with a contrasting, very precisely observed architectural detail of the arches within the church. I love that juxtaposition. And on the right are drawings of Furze Hill Manor House. And again, you get a long distance view. And then you zoom in on these various sort of particular architectural details. Most striking are the drawings of stained glass windows in Devon churches, also some in Somerset. The colours are exuberant. They are probably as bright today as they were 150 years ago, and each one is annotated. We are adding to, I'm sorry if that's cut off a little bit at the top, we are adding to the collections all the time. We've scanned enough artworks by George Townsend now to create a Townsend collection within the database. And I think others are bound to turn up and be added in the next phase of the project. And as I mentioned earlier, George Townsend is an artist that sort of creates links across organisations and collections in Devon. This is just a slightly zoomed in view of number 25 Friars Walk by Townsend, which is situated just outside the original city walls, and was developed, that whole area was sort of developed in the 18th century as an overspill. And this house still stands, but you probably wouldn't recognise it because it's been divided up into multiple dwellings now, and I think the bay windows are not quite there now. So drawings like this are really important as a record of what Exeter's buildings looked like. And of course, Townsend was an Exeter artist. We are still collecting artworks. Just recently, we had a generous donation of George Rowe prints and drawings, which will form another distinct collection once they are scanned and catalogued. And this is really just to give you an idea of his work. He was baptised at St Sidwell's Church in 1796, and he worked as an art teacher and lithographer in Exeter. And then he left to go to Australia, but he came back to live in Heavytree. And again, his work offers a glimpse of Devon life and landscapes in the first half of the 19th century. I'm always really drawn to images of tall ships. I just imagine our coastline full of tall ships. It must have been a spectacular sight, although familiar at the time. And my last image, before I end, we have numerous individual drawings and watercolours. Not all are signed, but we suspect that many are likely to be by members of the Exeter Diocesan Architectural Society. And I just end with this one because it's my favourite, so you'll have to just bear with me for a moment. It's a sketch from Topsham Ferry. When I worked at the V&A, I got to know the Constable collection quite well at one point. I'm not a Constable expert at all, but there is something of Constable's skies, I think, in this drawing. On the left there, those sort of dark, brooding skies with the slashes of rain. And I have adopted this drawing. So if you find a favourite book or drawing in our collections, you are invited to adopt it. You can adopt it for a friend, as a gift. You don't even have to be a member. We just invite everybody to take part and choose something special, a drawing of a favourite place, as I've done with my drawing here, which obviously isn't my drawing, but it feels like it because I've adopted it. And all the funds go towards our conservation programme. There is a separate page on our website for supporters if you want to get any more information about various ways that you can support the collections. And I think I will end there. I'll just say to close that designing a sort of a grant-funded project like this from scratch is a huge undertaking. And if anyone is thinking of going down the same path, or if you work with collections that you are looking to digitise and catalogue, then please do get in touch with me, and I would be happy to talk to you in more detail about any aspect of our project. If I just leave my contact details here for a minute, then you can jot down, that's just our library email address. And if you're not already a member and would like to use these collections, you can do so for a limited time. You can, we have a day pass, we have a week pass, we have 3-month temporary membership, and we are open Tuesday to Saturday, 10 until 5, and the library collections and the research service is open by appointment within those times. So if you have any questions about visiting or joining, then just email me at this email address, and I'd love to see you. I think I will end there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emma. That was, I hope, a really good introduction for everybody to what is a really valuable and really interesting collection, and one that you can now start to explore online, which is brilliant. I will take any questions in just a moment. Just while people are thinking about that, I think people generally have an idea with a digitisation project, don't they, that you gather all the stuff together and you go, okay, we've got 1,000 images here. They'll cost X amount of pounds each to digitise. There's our project, and you do them all, and that's it. What, for example, are the ongoing costs of something like hosting on PastView, just to give people an idea of why it's not just you pay for the digitisation and that's it?
Yeah, I mean, unless you've got some way of hosting your own database, then you are going to have to subscribe to someone else who will host it for you. I mean, we've had very positive experience with PastView, but you're right, it can cost anything from sort of 500 up to £2,000 a year to host. There is, we have sort of slightly also looked at the art fund, the name of it now. Lots of museums use it to put their collections or some of their collections online, and again, you have to pay for the number of artworks that you put up. So they have a sort of cheap rate of, you know, £50, where you have 20 images or 100 images, but if you want to put more images up, then you have to pay for more. So that would be an ongoing cost, that once you've completed your project and you have fully catalogued it and fully digitized it, that will be your maintenance cost. I mean, we have a maintenance cost just with the scanner that we've purchased. We went for a package where it came with, in case it goes wrong, because we're not scanner experts. But again, that sort of package would come to an end after you've done your digital. So you're right, it's really hosting it is the big, and making sure that you can cover those costs. Yeah.
I think it's important for people to remember, isn't it, that a project like this isn't a one-off cost. It's a one-off setup cost, and there's so much more than that. Okay, if you want to stop your screen share, if anybody else wants to then, providing that you're happy to remember that we are recording these and you will appear in the recording, but if you want to turn your camera on to feel that you are a part of the end of this talk, then do feel free to do so. And if you have any questions, if you could just indicate by using the kind of raise hand reaction or by popping them in the chat or something like that. There's a note in the chat from David Nation who says, it's an inspirational talk. I visited the institution a few times, but many years ago, and realised now how little I knew about its collection. A wonderful initiative, and I hope many volunteer. I'm better informed now about the options which will help us at Crediton Museum if we can ever contemplate having enough volunteers. That's the thing, isn't it?
Because you know, volunteer management is also time consuming. I mean, it's you know, we couldn't do what we do without our volunteers at all. But you do have to if you're designing a project, it is staff, that is staff management. Just because they're volunteers, you know, it is still staff management. Yeah.
There's a question here from Glyn in the chat. Could you repeat what you said about whether the catalogues are accessible online?
Yes. So the books, if you go to our website, across the top are various menu options, and one of them is the library. And if you click on that, you have two options. One is search our books and manuscripts, and that's, if you click on that, you're taken straight to Exeter University online catalogue. You can also, so from November last year, I got the collections added to Library Hub Discover. So you could bypass Exeter University website and just go straight to the DISC Library Hub Discover website. You can just Google DISC Library Hub Discover. And also from that page on our website, there's a box that you can click that says search our prints and drawings, and that will link you straight to our online Collections Explorer database.
Fantastic. I hope that answers that question. Thank you. Martin Graber, who's speaking this afternoon, has a hand up there. Martin, you got a question?
Hello, and thank you, Emma. That was an absolutely brilliant introduction to that part of your collection. I did visit the institution a few years ago, and it just looks like an Aladdin's cave of wonderful stuff. Unfortunately, I live rather too far away to drop in every day. But do you have any manuscript collections or diaries within the institution collection?
We do have manuscript collections. We have, I suppose, two main areas of manuscript collections. So we have the DEI's own institutional archive, and then we have a manuscript cupboard full of wonders. I would have to confess to you that at the moment, it is still not entirely catalogued online. We have had staff we've had Deborah Phillips actually from Southend come and start work on it, actually just sorting it and rehousing it. But yeah, that is yet another project that we will have to do. We do, but some material is online, and actually if you search for something and the shelf mark says manuscripts cupboard, then that will give an indication of how much is there. But yeah, I mean, all of this is such a long process, cataloging and digitizing. And actually, I have to say, we're not, museums and libraries all over the country are dealing with collections that are not yet digitized and catalogued. But yes, it is definitely on our priority list. Yeah. And
may I ask a supplementary question?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, carry on, and then Ian will come to you afterwards.
Actually, seeing Ian there, he probably knows the answer to this, because you mentioned Broadsides. Do you have a large collection of Broadsides, or what sort of stuff are we looking at?
Yes. Actually, this is one area where the catalogue is not quite as useful as it could be. If you search on the catalogue for something like Flying Post, it doesn't give you an awful lot of detail about exactly what our holdings are. And that's something that we're working on right now, actually, with we've got a volunteer cataloguer called Paul Octoloni, who's up from the university and works with us 2 days a week. But we have Flying Post, yeah, right from 1813, and actually some a little earlier. But because the earliest members started collecting the newspapers right from their foundation, we have collections from the 1813 onwards. We've got Flying Post and probably the Western Times and the Plymouth and Exeter Gazette are the three main newspapers. I mean, actually, all of these are also online at the British Newspaper Archive. And if you're a member of the DEI, you get automatic access to all the electronic databases of London Library. So you will get to use the British Newspaper Archive. But then again, if you want to also look at the original, you can. Ian, do you want to say anything to that?
Yeah. Well, the holdings are listed also in a fair amount of detail in the bibliography of British newspapers. And I, many years ago, produced the Devon section of that. As far as broadsheets are concerned, there is a volume of election broadsheets for the 1790, I think it is, and that's got quite a lot of stuff in verse, which would might interest Martin, of course, with his interest in broadside ballads. The amount of songs that were, or words that were sung to popular tunes at election time must have been absolutely deafening. But I'd like to take this opportunity of saying how fortunate we are to have a rare books librarian in post in Devon, because there is absolutely nothing anywhere else to serve heritage collections, including the local collections, which are just languishing at the moment. And bravo to everything that you and the other people at the institution are doing, the fantastic initiatives you've got, the active working with volunteers, this whole project that you're talking about. And I think it's also very important to say that it is a continuing thing. Once it's over and done with, that's not it. And we can go back to the Etched on Devon's Memory project that took place in about 2004, shortly before I left. That was much earlier on in the game, and we had a lot of lessons to learn there about putting in bids, about metadata, standards, and that sort of thing. That has really now all been lost since the transfer from Devon County Council to the Southwest Heritage Trust. So I have managed to resurrect it through archive.org, but that's the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, and I tried to put something together on that. But it's a warning that you do need to make it future-proof as far as possible. I thought I had.
Thanks, Ian. That's a challenge for any library and archive, is the future-proofing of material. And as more material is generated in a variety of formats, and some material now only being generated in digital formats, the whole archiving process becomes a completely different discussion to be had. I know this firsthand from my own archiving work and from my work with the Folklore Society, that there are huge discussions about future-proofing around formats, around how you store material, and the fact that the internet itself is a self-archiving collection, but how do you catalogue it? There are many discussions on there. We'll have to wrap this up in just a second. Tony Gale's just pointed out in the chat, the Burney newspaper collection is also great for 17th and 18th century material. That is part of the Gale online presence. He is at pains to point out that there is no relationship between himself and the Gale online presence. Thanks, Tony. Any final questions or comments before we wrap this session up? Okay, in that case, everyone please show your appreciation in whatever manner you normally show your appreciation on Zoom for Emma before she dashes off to work. Thank you so much, Emma. That was brilliant.
My pleasure. Thank you.